The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across a desolate highway. It was one of those afternoons where everything felt still, like the world had pressed pause. The kind of quiet that made you think twice about breaking it. John Cena, yep, the John Cena, was behind the wheel of his sleek black SUV, cruising along an almost abandoned stretch of road. His stomach growled, a reminder that he hadn't eaten anything substantial for hours. Up ahead, something caught his eye. A small roadside cafe with a faded sign above the entrance that read Mama D's Kitchen. The letters were chipped, like they'd been through more storms than anyone cared to count. But there was something about it, something warm, inviting, like stepping into a memory you didn't know you had. He slowed down, pulling into the nearly empty parking lot. There was only one other vehicle, an old pickup truck parked near the entrance, its paint worn but clean. Through the large front window, Cena could see warm lights illuminating checkered tablecloths and framed photos on the walls. Black and white snapshots of smiling faces, some faded, others sharp enough to tell stories of their own. It seemed like the kind of place where time stood still. He stepped out of his car, stretched his arms high above his head, and walked toward the door. As the bell above it jingled softly, little did he know this quiet pit stop would spiral into chaos. The bell above the cafe door gave a soft jingle as Cena stepped inside, and almost instantly, the quiet hum of the afternoon was shattered, not by chaos, but by sheer disbelief. The young waitress froze mid-motion, her hands trembling slightly as she dropped a glass onto the floor with an ear-splitting crash. For a second, there was silence, thick, heavy, and electric. Then came her shocked whisper, barely audible over the ringing in everyone's ears, "You're real." Cena raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a playful smirk. "Yeah," he said, leaning casually against the counter, "I'm real. The one and only." That broke the spell. The girl let out a high-pitched squeal that echoed through the cozy cafe like a firecracker going off. She clutched her head in disbelief, jumping up and down while peppering him with questions faster than anyone could keep track. "Oh my God. Oh my God. This is not happening. Wait. I need proof. My dad's gonna flip if I don't get something." Her grandmother emerged from the kitchen moments later, wiping her hands on a rag. She was short, stocky, with graying curls tucked under a floral apron. Her sharp eyes scanned Cena up and down before she pursed her lips. "Thought you'd be taller," she muttered dryly. The waitress gasped, turning to her grandmother like she'd just committed some unforgivable crime. "Grandma, that's John Cena. The GOAT. The legend. The 15-time champion." The older woman waved her hand dismissively, though a flicker of amusement softened her tough exterior. All right. You act like the man walked on water." She turned back to Cena, crossing her arms. "So? You want something to eat, or you just here to make my granddaughter lose her damn mind?" Cena grinned, pointing toward the menu board behind her. "Actually, I was hoping for some good homemade food. Been on the road all day, and this place looked perfect." The grandmother studied him for a beat longer before nodding sharply. "Good choice. Sit yourself down." As Cena settled into a seat near the window, the waitress practically vibrated with excitement. Okay, listen, I need a selfie. If I don't get a picture, my dad will think I'm making this up. And an autograph. No, two. One for me, one for my cousin. Actually, maybe three." Cena laughed, shaking his head. "How about we get that selfie after I eat?" She nodded eagerly, practically bouncing on her toes. Yes. Oh my God, this is the best day of my life." The distant rumble of engines grew louder, breaking the peaceful ambience like a storm rolling in. The young waitress froze mid-step, her eyes darting toward the window as four menacing figures clad in leather jackets burst through the door. Their heavy boots thudded ominously against the wooden floor, each step vibrating through the cafe like an unspoken threat. Their leader, Carter, a scar-faced brute with cold, calculating eyes, strode confidently to the counter. He dragged a gloved hand across the countertop, leaving streaks on its surface. "Well, well," he drawled, his voice dripping with venom. "Looks like we came at the perfect time. Quiet little spot, just how we like it." The tension in the room was suffocating. Carter turned his gaze to the grandmother behind the counter, flashing a fake grin. "How's business, Mama D?" His tone was mocking, taunting, as if he already knew the answer. Mama D didn't flinch, though her grip tightened slightly on the baseball but hidden beneath the counter. "What do you want, Carter?" she demanded, her voice low but firm. Carter chuckled darkly, shaking his head. "You already know what we want. It's the end of the month. Time for you to pay up." The waitress stepped forward, her earlier excitement replaced by sheer defiance. "We're not paying you anything," she snapped, her voice trembling but resolute. One of the bikers, a broad-shouldered man with a buzz cut, let out a laugh. "Oh, she's got some bite, huh? Cute." Carter leaned forward onto the counter, his smile vanishing. "See, that's not really how this works, sweetheart," he said, his voice dropping into something far more dangerous. "We keep this place safe. We make sure no trouble comes knocking. You show your appreciation with a little donation." The waitress exhaled sharply, her patience snapping. "You mean extortion. You don't protect anyone. You're the only trouble we ever have." A dangerous silence followed. Carter's grin faded entirely, his eyes darkening as he slowly turned his head to face her. "You've got quite the mouth on you," he muttered, his voice icy. Mama D stepped forward, her tough exterior unwavering. "You don't talk to my granddaughter like that, Carter." Carter smirked again, though there was no humor in it. "Then maybe you should teach her some respect, Mama D." Another biker, a wiry man with tattoos covering his arms, reached into his jacket and pulled out a small rusted metal pipe. He tapped it rhythmically against the side of his palm. "You know," he said, grinning wickedly, "I'd hate to see this nice little place go up in smoke. Be a real shame." Cena had been watching silently, his expression unreadable. But now, he leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table. "She said you're not getting anything," he spoke calmly, his voice cutting through the thick tension like a knife. The bikers turned toward him, almost as if they were just now noticing his presence. Carter frowned at him for a long second before his lips curled into a smirk. "And who the hell are you?" Cena took his time answering, meeting Carter's gaze head-on. His tone was casual but firm. "Just a guy here for lunch." The bikers glanced at each other, laughing nervously. Carter shook his head. "Well, just a guy, this isn't your business. Why don't you finish your meal and mind your own damn business?" The young waitress suddenly stepped forward, her voice rising. "He doesn't need to be part of this. You're the ones who came in here acting like you own the place." Carter's grin soured as he turned back toward her. "You really don't know when to shut up, do you?" His hand moved fast, not a punch, but a sharp grab toward her wrist. The motion was meant to intimidate, to make her flinch, to show that he held control of the situation. But before he could make contact, Cena was already standing. His chair scraped back against the floor, the sudden movement startlingly loud in the quiet cafe. Carter's hand froze inches from the girl's arm. His gaze snapped toward Cena, who now towered over him. Cena's voice was low and steady. "I think it's time for you to leave." Silence stretched for a beat too long. The bikers shifted uneasily, glancing between each other. Cena's presence was impossible to ignore now, his broad frame making the already small cafe feel even smaller. Carter narrowed his eyes, looking Cena up and down as if measuring him. "You think you're tough, huh?" Carter sneered. Cena didn't react. "I think you should take your boys and walk out that door." The distant rumble of engines grew louder, breaking the peaceful ambience like a storm rolling in. The young waitress froze mid-step, her eyes darting toward the window as four menacing figures clad in leather jackets burst through the door. Their heavy boots thudded ominously against the wooden floor, each step vibrating through the cafe like an unspoken threat. Their leader, Carter, a scar-faced brute with cold, calculating eyes, strode confidently to the counter. He dragged a gloved hand across the countertop, leaving streaks on its surface. "Well, well," he drawled, his voice dripping with venom. "Looks like we came at the perfect time. Quiet little spot, just how we like it." The tension in the room was suffocating. Carter turned his gaze to the grandmother behind the counter, flashing a fake grin. "How's business, Mama D?" His tone was mocking, taunting, as if he already knew the answer. Mama D didn't flinch, though her grip tightened slightly on the baseball but hidden beneath the counter. "What do you want, Carter?" she demanded, her voice low but firm. Carter chuckled darkly, shaking his head. "You already know what we want. It's the end of the month. Time for you to pay up." The waitress stepped forward, her earlier excitement replaced by sheer defiance. "We're not paying you anything," she snapped, her voice trembling but resolute. One of the bikers, a broad-shouldered man with a buzz cut, let out a laugh. "Oh, she's got some bite, huh? Cute." Carter leaned forward onto the counter, his smile vanishing. "See, that's not really how this works, sweetheart," he said, his voice dropping into something far more dangerous. "We keep this place safe. We make sure no trouble comes knocking. You show your appreciation with a little donation." The waitress exhaled sharply, her patience snapping. "You mean extortion. You don't protect anyone. You're the only trouble we ever have." A dangerous silence followed. Carter's grin faded entirely, his eyes darkening as he slowly turned his head to face her. "You've got quite the mouth on you," he muttered, his voice icy. Mama D stepped forward, her tough exterior unwavering. "You don't talk to my granddaughter like that, Carter." Carter smirked again, though there was no humor in it. "Then maybe you should teach her some respect, Mama D." Another biker, a wiry man with tattoos covering his arms, reached into his jacket and pulled out a small rusted metal pipe. He tapped it rhythmically against the side of his palm. "You know," he said, grinning wickedly, "I'd hate to see this nice little place go up in smoke. Be a real shame." Cena had been watching silently, his expression unreadable. But now, he leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table. "She said you're not getting anything," he spoke calmly, his voice cutting through the thick tension like a knife. The bikers turned toward him, almost as if they were just now noticing his presence. Carter frowned at him for a long second before his lips curled into a smirk. "And who the hell are you?" Cena took his time answering, meeting Carter's gaze head-on. His tone was casual but firm. "Just a guy here for lunch." The bikers glanced at each other, laughing nervously. Carter shook his head. "Well, just a guy, this isn't your business. Why don't you finish your meal and mind your own damn business?" The young waitress suddenly stepped forward, her voice rising. "He doesn't need to be part of this. You're the ones who came in here acting like you own the place." Carter's grin soured as he turned back toward her. "You really don't know when to shut up, do you?" His hand moved fast, not a punch, but a sharp grab toward her wrist. The motion was meant to intimidate, to make her flinch, to show that he held control of the situation. But before he could make contact, Cena was already standing. His chair scraped back against the floor, the sudden movement startlingly loud in the quiet cafe. Carter's hand froze inches from the girl's arm. His gaze snapped toward Cena, who now towered over him. Cena's voice was low and steady. "I think it's time for you to leave." Silence stretched for a beat too long. The bikers shifted uneasily, glancing between each other. Cena's presence was impossible to ignore now, his broad frame making the already small cafe feel even smaller. Carter narrowed his eyes, looking Cena up and down as if measuring him. "You think you're tough, huh?" Carter sneered. Cena didn't react. "I think you should take your boys and walk out that door." Cena's words hung in the air like a challenge, sharp and unyielding. The bearded leader tilted his head slightly, studying Cena with an intensity that made the room feel smaller than it already was. "You've got guts," he said finally, his voice low but edged with menace. "But guts don't win fights." Without warning, the leader lunged forward, swinging his steel baton with precision and speed. It sliced through the air, aimed directly at Cena's ribs. Cena reacted instantly, twisting his body just enough to avoid a direct hit. The baton grazed his side, tearing fabric but not flesh. He didn't flinch. Instead, he grabbed the leader's wrist mid-swing, stopping the momentum dead in its tracks. "You're right," Cena muttered, his voice calm but laced with authority. "Guts don't win fights." With a quick twist, he yanked the leader's arm downward, forcing him off balance. Before the man could recover, Cena drove his knee upward into the leader's stomach. The impact sent him stumbling backward, gasping for breath. The other bikers hesitated for half a second before charging en masse. One swung a heavy chain toward Cena's head, but Cena ducked under it, using the attacker's own momentum to flip him onto a nearby table. Another biker rushed at him with a wooden chair raised high like a weapon. Cena caught the chair mid-swing, ripping it from the man's hands and shoving him backward before delivering a brutal uppercut that sent him sprawling to the ground. Through it all, Cena moved with the kind of fluidity that came from years of training. Every punch, every block, every counterstrike was calculated yet instinctual. The cafe became a chaotic battleground. Broken furniture lay scattered across the floor, glass shards glinted ominously under the flickering lights, and the groans of defeated bikers filled the air. But the leader wasn't done. Despite being winded, he staggered back to his feet, gripping his baton tightly. His eyes burned with fury as he circled Cena, looking for an opening. "You think this ends here?" he spat, his voice hoarse. "This is just the beginning." Cena exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders. "Then let's finish it." With a roar, the leader charged again, swinging wildly. Cena sidestepped effortlessly, grabbing the man by his vest and lifting him clean off the ground. In one smooth motion, he delivered his signature move, the attitude adjustment, slamming the leader onto the cracked countertop with bone-jarring force. The wooden surface splintered under the impact, and the leader went limp, unconscious. Silence fell over the cafe, broken only by the ragged breathing of those still standing. Cena straightened, brushing dust off his hands. "Anyone else?" he asked, his tone casual but commanding. No one answered. The remaining conscious biker, the one who had tried to run earlier, raised his hands in surrender. "Nope," he stammered. "I'm good." The distant rumble of engines grew louder, breaking the fragile calm that had settled over Mama D's kitchen. Cena stood near the shattered rear door, his muscles still coiled like springs after dispatching 2 more bikers. His breathing was steady, but his eyes darted toward the windows where headlights sliced through the darkness outside. The bikers weren't done. They were circling the cafe like predators waiting for their prey to make a mistake. "They're trying to rattle us," Cena muttered under his breath, turning back toward the waitress and her grandmother. The young woman hugged herself tightly, her earlier bravery giving way to raw nerves. Her grandmother remained stoic, gripping the baseball bat with white-knuckled determination. "Don't let them see fear," the older woman said firmly, though her voice carried an edge of worry. "Fear is what they want." Cena nodded in agreement. "Stay low, stay quiet. Don't give them any openings." As if on cue, another loud bang echoed from the front entrance. This time it wasn't just a kick, it sounded like someone was using something heavier to try and break through. A metallic clang followed, then another, each strike reverberating through the cafe like thunder. "They mean business," Cena said grimly, moving closer to the front of the cafe. He peeked through the blinds, counting at least 10 motorcycles lined up outside. Their riders moved methodically, some pacing back and forth while others kept their engines running, creating a wall of noise designed to intimidate. "They're not here to talk," the waitress whispered, her voice trembling. "What do we do?" "We hold our ground," Cena replied without hesitation. "And when they come in, we take them down, one by one." The grandmother stepped forward, her jaw set. "This isn't your fight, son. You've done enough already." Cena shook his head, his expression unyielding. "It became my fight the moment they walked into this cafe. Besides," he added with a faint smirk, "I'm not exactly known for walking away when people need help." Before anyone could respond, the front door burst open violently. The bearded leader of the Iron Reapers strode inside, flanked by several of his men. His presence filled the room, his piercing gaze locking onto Cena like a predator sizing up its quarry. "You really should have walked away," the leader growled, his voice cold and measured. Cena exhaled slowly, adjusting his stance as he squared off against the man. "Funny, I was just about to say the same thing to you." The air between them crackled with tension, thick enough to cut with a knife. The bikers spread out, forming a loose semicircle around Cena, their weapons glinting ominously in the dim light. "John," the waitress whispered, her voice barely audible. "Stay back," Cena said firmly, never taking his eyes off the leader. Without warning, the bikers attacked. Two of them lunged at Cena simultaneously, swinging chains and pipes with brutal efficiency. Cena ducked under the first strike, driving his fist into the gut of the biker on his right. The man doubled over, gasping for air, before collapsing to the floor. The second biker swung wildly, aiming for Cena's head. Cena sidestepped effortlessly, grabbing the chain mid-swing and yanking the man forward. With a swift uppercut, he sent the biker crashing into a nearby table, shattering it into splinters. But the leader didn't join the fray, not yet. Instead, he watched from the doorway, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. More bikers surged forward, attempting to overwhelm Cena with sheer numbers. One managed to land a hit, slamming his fist into Cena's ribs. For a split second, pain flickered across Cena's face, but it vanished almost instantly. "You picked the wrong guy to mess with," Cena growled, grabbing the attacker by the back of his neck and driving his forehead into the man's face. Blood sprayed as the biker crumpled to the ground. Behind the counter, the waitress and her grandmother watched in stunned silence. The old woman tightened her grip on the baseball bat, ready to step in if needed. The leader finally moved, reaching into his leather vest and pulling out a steel baton. He flicked it open with a sharp snap, his gaze locked onto Cena. "You've got skill," the leader admitted, rolling his shoulders. "But skill doesn't mean a damn thing against inevitability." Cena cracked his neck, his stance unwavering. "Is that supposed to scare me?" The leader smirked. "No, this is." With lightning speed, he swung the baton at Cena's ribs. Cena barely managed to block it with his forearm, the impact sending a jolt of pain through his muscles. The leader pressed his advantage, delivering another quick strike aimed at Cena's knee. Cena stepped back just in time, narrowly avoiding the blow. This fight was different. There were no rules, no referees, no scripted outcomes. The leader fought dirty, his movements calculated and precise. Each strike was meant to cripple, to incapacitate. But Cena wasn't fazed. Years of training in wrestling and martial arts had taught him how to adapt, how to survive. The two men circled each other now, both breathing heavily, both waiting for the other to make a mistake. "Come on, John," the waitress whispered, her voice tinged with desperation. The leader smirked again, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "You're strong," he taunted. "But strength alone won't win this." Cena grinned, a dangerous, predatory smile. "Good thing I've got more than just strength." The distant roar of engines grew louder, a relentless hum that vibrated through the walls of Mama D's kitchen. The bikers weren't just circling, they were stalking, their headlights flashing like predatory eyes as they encircled the cafe. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Cena stood near the shattered rear door, his muscles coiled tightly, ready for whatever came next. "They're trying to rattle us," he muttered under his breath, turning back toward the waitress and her grandmother. "Don't let them." The young waitress nodded, though her trembling hands betrayed her fear. She hugged herself tightly, her earlier excitement replaced by sheer dread. Her grandmother, however, remained unshaken. The older woman moved quickly, locking the front door and flipping off the main lights. Shadows enveloped the cafe, plunging it into an eerie half-darkness. "Stay low," Cena instructed, his voice calm but firm. "And keep quiet." The grandmother reached beneath the counter and pulled out the old baseball bat she'd been holding onto since the first attack. It was worn, its surface scuffed and ribbed from years of use, but it still felt solid in her grip. Cena nodded approvingly. "Good call," he said. "We'll need every advantage we can get." A loud bang echoed from the back of the cafe, the rear door. Someone was trying to break in. The sound reverberated through the room, each thud more aggressive than the last. "They're not giving up," the waitress whispered, her voice barely audible over the noise. Cena motioned for them to stay put as he crept toward the back. His steps were careful, deliberate, his focus razor-sharp. The closer he got, the clearer he could hear voices on the other side of the door. "Break it down already," one voice hissed, laced with impatience. "Almost there," another grunted, followed by another heavy kick against the wood. Cena pressed his back against the wall beside the door, inhaling deeply to steady himself. Then, with precise timing, he yanked the door open. The two bikers on the other side stumbled forward, caught completely off guard. Before they could react, Cena grabbed the closest one by his jacket and slammed him hard against the wall. The second biker swung wildly, but Cena ducked under the punch and countered with a sharp elbow strike to the ribs. The man doubled over, gasping for air. The first biker struggled, reaching for something in his pocket, a knife maybe, but Cena didn't give him the chance. He grabbed the man by the collar and lifted him clean off the ground. "You really don't learn, do you?" Cena muttered, before throwing him aside like a rag doll. The second biker, still wheezing, stumbled backward, panic flashing across his face. You don't know who you're messing with," he stammered. Cena advanced on him, his expression unreadable. "I'm getting a pretty good idea." Before the biker could make a run for it, the cafe door swung open violently. The bearded leader of the Iron Reapers stepped inside, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. This time, he wasn't smiling. "You really should have walked away," he growled, his voice cold and measured. Cena exhaled slowly, adjusting his stance. "Funny, I was just about to say the same thing to you." The bearded leader of the Iron Reapers wasn't done, not by a long shot. After Cena's signature move left him sprawled unconscious on the cracked counter, the room fell into an eerie silence. But it was only temporary. The man stirred, groaning as he pushed himself up with visible effort. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, and his eyes burned with a mix of fury and humiliation. "You think you've won," he spat, his voice hoarse but venomous. "You've made the biggest mistake of your life." Cena didn't respond immediately. Instead, he rolled his shoulders, his breathing steady despite the chaos around him. His navy blue t-shirt was torn further now, exposing more of his muscular frame. Sweat glistened on his skin under the dim light, catching highlights that made him look almost otherworldly amidst the wreckage. The waitress and her grandmother stood frozen behind the counter, watching in stunned silence. The old woman still gripped the baseball bat tightly, though her knuckles had turned white from the strain. The young waitress clutched the signed napkin like a lifeline, her wide eyes darting between Cena and the leader. "Talk is cheap," Cena finally said, his tone calm but edged with steel. "Actions speak louder." The leader snarled, reaching for something tucked into his boot, a small switchblade. He flicked it open, the blade glinting menacingly in the flickering red and blue lights of the police sirens outside. "This ends now," the leader growled, lunging forward with unexpected speed. Cena sidestepped the first slash, grabbing the leader's wrist mid-swing and twisting it hard enough to make the knife clatter to the floor. But the leader wasn't deterred. With a roar, he headbutted Cena, sending both of them stumbling backward. The impact rattled Cena momentarily, but years of taking hits in the ring had taught him how to shake it off. As the leader swung wildly again, Cena countered with precision, driving his fist into the man's ribs. The blow landed with a sickening crunch, forcing the leader to stagger back against the shattered counter. But this fight wasn't just physical, it was mental. The leader fought dirty, throwing everything he had at Cena: chairs, plates, even shards of broken glass. Each strike was meant to distract, to weaken, to wear Cena down. And for a moment, it seemed like it might work. One biker who had been feigning unconsciousness suddenly leapt up, aiming a chain at Cena's legs. Caught off guard, Cena stumbled, giving the leader the opening he needed. In a flash, the man grabbed the chain and wrapped it around Cena's neck, pulling tight. The waitress gasped, clutching her hands over her mouth. Her grandmother stepped forward, raising the baseball bat, but Cena held up a hand. "Stay back," he managed to choke out, his voice strained but firm. With sheer determination, Cena reached up, grabbing the chain with both hands and yanking it free. He spun around, delivering a devastating punch that sent the leader crashing into the wall. The biker who had attacked from behind tried to flee, but Cena caught him easily, slamming him face first onto the floor. Now, only the leader remained standing, or rather, barely standing. His knees buckled as he leaned heavily against the counter, blood dripping steadily onto the floor. "I warned you," Cena said, his voice low and commanding. "Walk away while you still can." The leader laughed bitterly, coughing up blood. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't over. Not for me. Not for anyone." Before Cena could respond, the sound of approaching sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights flooded through the windows, casting pulsating shadows across the ruined cafe. The leader let out a defeated sigh, knowing the game was up. Officers poured into the cafe, weapons drawn, shouting orders as they rounded up the remaining bikers. The mustached officer from earlier stepped forward, shaking his head in disbelief. "You again," he muttered, looking at Cena. "What did I miss this time?" Cena smirked, wiping sweat from his brow. Just another day at the office. The flashing red and blue lights painted the cafe in an eerie glow as officers swarmed the scene, their boots crunching over shattered glass and splintered wood. The mustached officer from earlier, now visibly exhausted by the absurdity of it all, rubbed his temples before turning to Cena. His gaze flickered between the destruction, the unconscious bikers sprawled across the floor, and the man standing calmly amidst the chaos. "You again," the officer muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. "What is it with you and these situations?" Cena smirked, crossing his arms. "Hey, I didn't start this party. Just finished it." The young waitress stepped forward eagerly, her earlier fear replaced by pure exhilaration. "Officer, you're not going to believe what happened here tonight," she said, practically bouncing on her toes. "These guys, they came in acting like they owned the place, threatening us, trying to extort money. And then," she paused for dramatic effect, pointing at Cena. "John Cena showed up and took them all down." The officer raised an eyebrow, glancing at Cena skeptically. "Is that so?" "It's true," the grandmother chimed in, gripping her baseball bat tightly. Her voice was firm, unyielding. "These thugs have been terrorizing us for months. They put my husband in the hospital. But tonight, thanks to him," she nodded toward Cena, "they got exactly what they deserved." The officer sighed deeply, pulling out his notepad. "All right, let's get this straight. You two are willing to testify? File charges? This isn't something we can sweep under the rug." The waitress nodded emphatically. "Absolutely. We'll write a whole book about it if you want." Her grandmother added, "And make sure those bastards never come near our cafe again." Satisfied, the officer began jotting down notes. Meanwhile, paramedics arrived to tend to the injured bikers, including Carter, who was still groggy but awake. As they loaded him onto a stretcher, he locked eyes with Cena one last time. "This isn't over," Carter rasped, his voice hoarse but defiant. Cena didn't blink. "Yes, it is." For a moment, there was silence. Then Carter looked away, his glare faltering as if deep down, he knew Cena was right. The stretcher wheeled off into the ambulance, its siren wailing softly as it disappeared into the night. With the immediate threat neutralized, the cafe fell into a strange calm. Broken furniture lay scattered everywhere, a testament to the battle that had unfolded, but the oppressive weight of fear had finally lifted. The young waitress turned to Cena, beaming with gratitude. "You were incredible. Seriously, I'm never going to stop talking about this. My dad is going to lose his mind when he hears what happened." Cena chuckled, leaning casually against the counter. "Speaking of your dad, how about we make sure he believes you?" She gasped, grabbing her phone and shoving it into his hands. "Yes. We need a selfie. And an autograph. Oh my God, I need 3 copies." Cena laughed, snapping a quick picture with her before grabbing a napkin. He signed it with a flourish, adding a simple yet powerful message: "Never give up, John Cena." The waitress clutched the napkin like it was a priceless artifact, her eyes shining with awe. "This is going straight on the wall," she declared, already envisioning where it would hang. Her grandmother smiled approvingly, extending a hand toward Cena. "You're a good man. And damn, you've got a hell of a right hook." Cena shook her hand firmly, grinning. "I try." As the officers packed up and the sirens faded into the distance, the cafe finally felt peaceful again. The physical scars remained, the broken tables, the cracked countertop, but the atmosphere was lighter, freer. Cena turned back toward the grandmother before heading out. "You're going to be okay," he said, his tone reassuring. She nodded, her expression resolute. "We always are." The young waitress grinned, waving enthusiastically as Cena headed toward the door. "And now we've got a John Cena story to tell for the rest of our lives." As Cena stepped out of the cafe, the cool night air hit him like a refreshing wave after the chaos inside. He paused for a moment, glancing back at the small roadside diner that had become an unlikely battleground. The neon sign above the entrance flickered faintly, casting a warm but weary glow over the scene. Through the large front window, He could see the young waitress and her grandmother tidying up what they could despite the wreckage, clearing shattered glass, righting overturned chairs, and salvaging pieces of their lives from the debris. The waitress caught his gaze through the window and waved enthusiastically, holding up the signed napkin as if to remind him of the legacy he'd left behind. Her grandmother stood beside her, gripping the baseball bat loosely now, her expression softer than before but still resolute. It was clear these two women weren't just survivors. They were fighters, determined to protect what mattered most. Cena smiled faintly, tipping an imaginary hat toward them before turning toward his SUV. But just as he opened the driver's side door, the waitress hurried out onto the porch, calling after him. "Hey, John," she shouted, clutching the framed photo of her father near the boxing poster on the wall. "We're putting your picture right there, next to my dad's favorite boxing poster." Cena chuckled, leaning against the side of his vehicle. "I'll be honored," he said sincerely, his voice carrying across the quiet parking lot. She grinned widely, practically bouncing on her toes. "Oh my God, this is insane. Like, actually insane. My dad's going to lose it when he sees this. Seriously, thank you for everything." Her gratitude wasn't just about the fight, it was deeper than that. Cena understood. This wasn't just about saving a cafe, it was about standing up for something bigger. Justice. Family. Hope. He nodded, giving her one last reassuring smile. "Take care of yourself, and your grandma. And tell your dad I said hi." With that, he climbed into his SUV, started the engine, and pulled away from Mama D's kitchen. As the taillights disappeared down the dark highway, the waitress stood on the porch, watching until the sound of the engine faded completely. She turned back toward the cafe, clutching the signed napkin tightly to her chest, her eyes shining with awe and determination. Inside, the grandmother hung the napkin proudly on the wall near the entrance, next to the boxing poster. Beneath it, she scribbled a caption in bold letters, "Never give up, John Cena." It wasn't just a keepsake, it was a reminder. A reminder that heroes don't always wear capes or arrive in flashy cars. Sometimes, they walk into your life unexpectedly, eat fried chicken at your counter, and change everything without asking for anything in return. Driving away from Mama D's kitchen, Cena couldn't help but reflect on everything that had just unfolded. The quiet afternoon pit stop he'd envisioned had turned into something far greater, a clash of good versus evil, courage against intimidation, and resilience in the face of fear. It wasn't scripted or choreographed like his wrestling matches. This was raw, real life. And yet, it felt oddly familiar. As the highway stretched ahead of him, bathed in the soft glow of moonlight, Cena replayed moments from the night, the biker's menacing stares, the waitress's wide-eyed disbelief, the grandmother's unshakable strength. He thought about the young waitress and her father, who had stood up to those thugs even when it cost him dearly. That kind of bravery didn't come easily. It came from love, for family, for what you believed in, for justice. But as much as the night had been about protecting the cafe, it was also about sending a message. Evil thrives when good people stay silent. Tonight, no one stayed silent. Not the waitress, not her grandmother, and certainly not him. Cena glanced at the rearview mirror, catching sight of the distant flashing lights of police vehicles still lingering near the cafe. For a moment, he wondered if the Iron Reapers would return. They might try again. Criminals like them rarely gave up without a fight. But tonight, they had lost. More importantly, the cafe owners now knew they weren't alone. Justice had been served, and hope had taken root where fear once lived. He sighed deeply, feeling both drained and fulfilled. These weren't just stories for headlines or action movies. They happened every day, hidden behind closed doors, in small towns and forgotten corners of the world. Ordinary people faced extraordinary challenges all the time. Sometimes, they needed someone to remind them they could win. And sometimes, Heroes walked among us when we least expected it. Would you have stood your ground?
And that's where our story ends. What did you think of this story? Share your emotions in the comments below. We'd love to know what you remember most. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And if you are in the mood for another exciting story, check out our next video. It's waiting for you. Until then, stay curious, get inspired, and keep exploring the stories that make life extraordinary. See you in the next one.